Good morning and welcome, everyone. Hereby call the meeting to order. I'm Ken Weinstein, Chair of the BBG. This is an open meeting of the Broadcasting Board of Governors held in compliance with the Sunshine Act. This is an exciting time for this agency. As of August 22nd, the BBG is now the United States Agency for Global Media. CEO John Lansing will tell us more about this exciting name change later. Meantime, I should note a digital recording of this meeting will be available for on-demand viewing on the agency's new website, www.usagm.gov. Let me repeat that, www.usagm.gov. Joining me today are Governors Aaron Kempner, Shell, and Kornblue will be on the line, and Chief of Staff Jennifer Hall Godfrey, who is representing Heather Nauert, Acting Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs at the Department of State. Welcome. Now, I'd like to start with personnel this morning, and with a personnel announcement. As many of you know, Tom Kent is resigning as President of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty at the end of September. This will be Tom's last meeting with the board. After 2 years with RFE-RL, he will depart at the end of this month. We're deeply grateful to Tom for his many contributions to RFE-RL and to U.S. international media more broadly, including improving and amplifying the work of RFE-RL at this very critical and challenging moment in global affairs and in U.S. foreign policy. So Tom, please join me and CEO Lansing at the podium so we can present a certificate of appreciation to you. And let's go up there now.
Thank you so much.
Say a few words?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, just briefly. I really appreciate the kind recognition of my service. I'm so proud of what we've accomplished at RFE-RL in the past 2 years. Across our territories, it's clear that we are an essential source of local news in all 25 of our languages to the countries that we serve, which are some of the most geopolitically critical parts of the world. Every one of the countries that we serve is either a target of Kremlin-controlled media or extremist propaganda or both. Their messaging is well-funded, it's nimble, it's multi-platform, yet 31 million people a week turn to RFE-RL for reliable news because of our advocacy for clean and decent government and our message of ethnic and religious tolerance. As we restart service this year to Romania and Bulgaria, our audience will grow even more. The lion's share of credit for what RFE-RL has accomplished, of course, goes to our staff, to the reporters and producers in Prague and in 17 offices across our territories. 3 of our reporters died this year in Afghanistan. Countless others in the countries we cover have been jailed or harassed. Our people have no diplomatic immunity, no other special protection. Too often they and their families face the full force of regimes that will do anything to stop the spreading of truth. Everywhere in the countries that we serve, and my colleagues know, in all the countries that are served by USAGM, journalism is becoming increasingly dangerous. That's true even in countries that claim to respect democratic norms. Just a few days ago, a court in Ukraine approved the seizure of 1.5 years of phone and SMS records for Natalia Suletska of our Ukrainian investigative team. This is an outrageous violation of Ukraine's own press laws. Along with free press advocates in Ukraine and abroad, RFE-RL is fighting to reverse this wrong-headed decision. It's been my honor to stand up for the staff and mission of RFE-RL in Russia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Pakistan, and every one of our countries where our work and staff are threatened. The U.S. Agency for Global Media has backed us strongly in fighting for media freedom. I want to thank the board and CEO Lansing for giving me the opportunity to serve, and I want to express special gratitude to the government and people of the Czech Republic, our gracious hosts, who have unflinchingly supported the work of RFE-RL. Thanks very much.
Tom, I know that all of us on the board, I speak for the entire board by expressing our deep gratitude to you for your leadership. You will be missed, and we wish you the very best moving forward. We deeply appreciate all that you have done for RFERL in getting the message out and standing up for freedom and truth. Thank you. Great. Now we turn to threats to freedom of the press. Threats against journalists around the world continue at an alarming rate, and our journalists are no exception. Let us take a look at some of the incidents that have happened since the last board meeting. As we know, every day, journalists for the networks of the U.S. Agency for Global Media risk harassment, physical harm, and imprisonment simply to do their jobs. In recent months, journalists from China to Nicaragua, Turkmenistan to Cambodia have felt increasing pressure. In Ukraine, let me note, in addition to what Tom just mentioned about Natalia Seletsky, that RFE-RL contributor Stanislav Asayev continues to be held by Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. You can see his picture up there. On July 20th, Senator Marco Rubio tweeted a call for his release, and the Congressional Freedom of the Press Caucus co-chairs, Representatives Adam Schiff and Steve Shabbat, issued a statement as well calling for Asayev's release. In Turkmenistan, the United Nations Human Rights Commission has issued a decision finding the Turkmen government responsible for the death of RFE-RL service contributors Ogulsapar Muradova, who was in custody 12 years ago. This long overdue ruling is significant because of the continuing government actions taken against RFE-RL Turkmen service correspondents. In Vietnam, 3 Voice of America Vietnamese reporters were arrested and detained in June as they covered violent demonstrations in Vietnam that erupted after the government announced plans to create economic zones that protesters said would favor Chinese investors. Despite this, they were able to file dramatic footage showing police surrendering to local protesters in Binh Thuan province, vehicles on fire, and burned down government property. Their videos were viewed more than 3 million times, documenting what turned out to be a rare violent protest and the largest demonstration in Vietnam in decades. On July 5th, authorities in Vietnam arrested independent blogger and political contributor to VOA, Lê Anh Hung, and charged him with abusing, quote, abusing democratic freedoms to infringe upon the interests of the state, lawful rights, and interests of organizations and/or citizens. He is a key figure of Vietnam's radio community and a member of the Independent Journalists Association of Vietnam. RFA Vietnamese videographer Nguyen Van Hoa, who continues to be held in prison, was reportedly beaten by authorities while imprisoned. He is currently serving a 7-year sentence. In China, 2 VOA Mandarin service journalists were harassed and briefly detained after interviewing 84-year-old Professor Sun Weng Guang, a critic of the Chinese government. This follows a dramatic event that played out live on VOA's air as the professor was forcibly detained in his house while giving a live telephone interview. Also in China, the family members of several RFA Uyghur service journalists continue to be held in re-education camps. Nicaragua, VOA Spanish reporters Gazelle Tobias and Jacopo Luzik survived a week of reporting amidst multiple stops and detentions by police, paramilitary, and military personnel in Nicaragua. In one incident, they were briefly detained and their passports and press IDs were confiscated. In Cambodia, restrictions on press freedom were tightened, have become the tightest ever, leading up to in the lead up to the July 29th election. Dozens of independent radio stations were closed, and Radio Free Asia, as you know, was forced to cease operations in the country. VOA Khmer Service's deep Washington-based reporter Kamara Povsak traveled to Cambodia to cover the election and to provide extra support to the local bureau staff. While there, an image came out labeling Kamara and other international reporters, including those from RFA, as enemies of the people. You can see this, the video there on the screen. The image was widely distributed on Facebook, and Kamara received several threatening phone calls. Shortly after the election, 2 former RFA Khmer Service journalists, Wan Chin and Yang Sotheran, who had been jailed for 8 months on trumped-up charges, were released on bail in Phnom Penh. While their release is welcome, these former journalists should never have been placed in this predicament in the first place. I know I speak for all members here when I say, all board members here when I say we abhor the harassment, imprisonment, and attempts to silence our journalists. And I want to encourage all board members, all present, to publicize this information as soon as you hear about these arrests. And I really want to especially thank the State Department, Heather Nauert, as spokesperson, who has done an excellent job publicizing these threats to press freedom. Tomas.
If I may, to follow up on that, there was an incident also with the Radio and TV Marti reporter in Nicaragua. He was detained along with the cameraman when covering the disturbances in Nicaragua. But the most important thing happened this weekend when we were doing a test to view TV Marti without interference in 4 different locations in Havana. Hours after the live broadcast to the City of Miami OCB headquarters, state police went by the dozens into the 3 homes. They beat several independent reporters. They took them. This was a Friday night. They kept them for Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. They were released on Monday. They confiscated several iPhones and iPads and different part of the that were being used as the test. The tests were successful, but the government of Cuba used extreme force, especially with an 80-year-old woman who was just happened to be at the home. She was pushed and shoved and had to be treated by doctors. So I think that this is happening also in this hemisphere.
Thank you, Tomas. Very disturbing report indeed. And these arrests, unfortunately, are yet another sign of the deep impact that you're having and that the entire agency is having around the globe. And I know I speak for everyone here when I say that we absolutely abhor the harassment, imprisonment, and attempts to silence our journalists, and especially both our journalists and their families, as we've seen in the case of the Uyghurs. Now let's turn to today's board business. The presence of 5 or more governors satisfies the board's quorum requirement. A quorum being present, the board may conduct business based on majority vote. On August 22nd, the board received via email materials for the consent agenda, which allowed sufficient time for all governors to review the agenda prior to this meeting. We didn't receive any comments from the governors. This month's consent agenda is at tabs 1 and tab 2, and at this time I'd like to ask if any governors have any comments on the consent agenda. That being said, there being no comments, I'd like to ask if any governors wish to move for the adoption of the consent agenda by the board. Right, Governor Kempner, is there a second? Governor Aaron, all in favor, please say aye. Aye, great. Okay, are there any objections? There being none, okay, that passes unanimously. And now we turn to the public comment section. The board permits members of the public who register to attend our open meetings the opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes. I understand we have one member of the public here today who would like to make remarks. I would ask that you keep your remarks to 3 minutes in order to allow time for the broader board discussion. Please come to the table and introduce yourself before you speak.
Mr. Chairman, and Director of Washington Programs for the University of Southern California Annenberg Center for Communication. Today we seem immersed in conflict and disorder, perhaps more here in Washington, D.C. than in Cincinnati or Des Moines or San Antonio. Many argue that the focus on daily disagreement has obscured larger agreements that unite Americans, things we all believe, those truths that we say are self-evident. But beyond that, the focus on daily debate has obscured a larger and extraordinary an event without precedent, which offers an opportunity to those in this building and beyond whose work is to tell America's story to the world. Buried deep in the news a few weeks ago was a report that sometime in the next 2 years, probably around the middle of the calendar year of 2020, barring World War or another catastrophic event, for the first time in human history, the majority of people on Earth will be free of want. The actual headline said most people will be middle class being defined as being able to afford food, shelter, and other essentials. Which brings us to telling America's story to the world. In this case, telling America's story to the world is reporting America's role in this historic worldwide achievement. How did humanity reach this milestone? Was it through the work of a leader in Moscow? Not likely. Was it through leaders in Tehran, Pyongyang, or Havana? I don't think so. Rather, it was through principles and ideals that are essentially American, principles and ideals which we may not have invented, but which we have embraced and from which we have prospered. They include freedom, entrepreneurship, empowerment of women, education. And as America prospered, Americans shared. 70 years ago, the Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe. 50 years ago, the Ford and Rockefeller Foundation's Green Revolution saved 1 billion people from starvation with agricultural innovations that are still with us today. 20 years ago, the spread of the internet and mobile phone technologies empowered people throughout the world. Today, Gates and other foundations work to reduce disease worldwide and to harness microcredit and other entrepreneurial tools to help people lift themselves from poverty. And the U.S. government has invested and continues to invest in all of these and so much more that have brought us to this moment. This global human achievement is the achievement of billions of people around the world. It is also America's achievement. And so at this turn of history, it is a part of America's story that should be told to the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautifully stated and inspirational for us. And with that, I would like to turn it over to CEO and Director John Lansing to give a brief report on agency operations since our last board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Governors. When I joined the BBG in 2015, it was important to me that I learn everything I could about the people who work here, the people we work with, and the work we do around the globe. I spent months on a listening tour, stakeholders on Capitol Hill, the State Department, the White House, think tanks, media development community, and our public diplomacy colleagues, like Adam. They almost all said the same thing, that the BBG does not accurately reflect the work we do now. And the future should be more dynamic and certainly more digital. Taking that to heart 3 years ago, we've significantly expanded what we do in our work around the world. Thanks to the creation of the International Coordinating Committee, the 5 entity leaders, our programs are more collaborative and far-reaching, more digital, more social, and targeting more important audiences in parts of the world that are the toughest media environments anywhere. We're laying the foundation for us to successfully compete in this ever-changing media industry around the globe in some of these most restrictive areas. So I'd like to share a video with you that illustrates the passion that our folks have for this work that we're doing in this newly energized U.S. Agency for Global Media.
I got into journalism because I wanted to meet people and tell their stories.
It's important that I succeed because in order to accomplish the mission, everyone has to know what's going on.
As project managers, we support the fine work that our journalists do to bring news and information to our global audiences.
You know, I'm well aware that there are tremendous consequences for our reporting, that people are hanging on every word.
I am proud of the fact that we maintain high standards of journalism. If you miss only one side of the story, then the story is not complete and you lose credibility.
I like doing it because I understand how important it is for our audience that we are in the know.
Sports allow me to report on inspirational stories that sometimes surprise even me.
I'm from China, and as you all know, there's a country where there's no Facebook, no YouTube, no Google, and you will never find any information sensitive to the government on internet or anywhere else.
I believe that we really fill in this demand for quality independent journalism, and I'm really proud of the fact that what we do here not only informs our audience, but also educates and inspires them.
I report on all U.S. defense and national security policies regarding the situation in the Middle East.
Our responsibility is to make sure that all of the work of the 5 broadcast entities, whether it's somebody running down a story with a lead, anything at all that lands on our floor, it's our job to make sure it's all packaged up, wrapped up pretty, and sent out to our global audience.
As an Al Hurra journalist, I am dedicated to covering stories related to human rights, freedom of expression, and most importantly, to giving a voice to the voiceless by hosting activists not seen on other Arabic language networks.
Free media contributes to good governance.
We live in a world where free flow of information is so important, and to know that we are transmitting that information to an island where its people are only being informed by the official line. There is no objectivity, there is no discussion, it's just something that is said from the government, and that's it. And we are the alternative, and we have been the alternative for more than 3 decades.
We have to do it. We have to tell the whole story. Our audience demands it, and the news demands it. You have to see what I see on this story, and that's what I want to tell you.
Dari Washington DC, saya Patsy Widakuswara dan tim VOA. This is who we are, and that's what we do.
So as of August 22nd, we are the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Our mission remains unchanged, and our commitment to that mission is resolute. I want to thank the board. I want to thank Michael Kempner for your help in this project. And more importantly, I want to thank our staff across the agency that participated in putting all of this together. And just to tie a bow on it, I have a short video, a little bit more fun, that illustrates what it means to be no longer the Broadcasting Board of Governors and now the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Lori?
The United States brings meaningful, objective news and information to people around the world under the umbrella of the Broadcasting Board of Governors, a name that doesn't really say who we are or what we do. So, we're fixing that with a new name that says who we are, a modern, international media organization with a dynamic array of platforms, channels, and programming. We are now the United States Agency for Global Media. A new name, same great coverage.
All right. We'll have coffee mugs for everybody sometime. As soon as we get a budget approved, we'll have coffee mugs. So now I want to jump into the ICC highlights, and I want to begin with Amanda, really Amanda and Tom, but Amanda will take the lead. As you know, I think I mentioned earlier, I commissioned a study by the American Foreign Policy Council to take a fresh look at our Persian language content, both at Radio Free Europe at FARDA and here, VOA Persian. And we took their recommendations to heart. They helped us understand that we needed to put more effort, time, and resources into both the quality of the production and the richness of the journalism. Well, under Amanda and Tom's leadership, they've chosen to take a giant leap forward. And in the model of current time, they're now in the process of building a 24/7 global Farsi language channel that will be not just news, it'll have news and breaking news, but also other programming, lifestyle, et cetera, that can be of interest not just to people living in Iran, but to Iranian speakers anywhere around the world. And that's the key to the success of current time, is that we target languages, not places. And so with that, I probably stole too much of her thunder, but I'll let Amanda talk about the Persian 24/7 channel.
Thank you. Shall we run the video first?
Sure.
Okay.
Introducing the new Global Persian Language Network, created with the resources of Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, VOA 365.
We are in the show.
For Iranians inside Iran and around the globe. News, analysis, the American story, the world story.
Stand by on camera one.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. And as John said, we are collaborating with Radio Free Europe, just like we did on Current Time, although we will be taking advantage of the strong brand that VOA has by titling this new channel VOA 365. We're expecting a soft launch with the NewsHour in November, and planning on a hard launch of the entire channel in January. This will be focused on television, but it will also be combined with a strong suite of social media platforms in Farsi. Our aim is to grow our audience, which is currently estimated at 4.5 million people. Total USAGM Farsi audience, as this video says, reaches 1 in 4 of adult Iranians. We're going to be targeting Iranians not only in Iran, but also the diaspora around the world, which is estimated at 2 to 5 million people outside of Iran. We're going to be reaching them, as John said, by using modernized graphics, music, a production pace, new studios, and this is all responding to the feedback from our audiences that said we need to improve not only the news that we offer, the pace of the news that we offer, but also the visual ways that we present these news. And we're also going to be using this new network to drive our coverage outside of Washington, something that we've been doing for the last 2 years, but we'll be focusing on reopening our bureaus in Los Angeles, using our bureau in London, and also developing a network of stringers across the United States to tell our important American story. So I hope you will all tune in when it comes. I'd also like to add just one other thing of another ambitious project that we are now gearing up. It's still in the research phase, but I think it's going to be very important for us because it harkens back to Voice of America's origins in bringing news and information to those who are most closed off on the earth. In World War II, that would be behind Nazi lines in Germany, and during the Cold War, behind the Iron Curtain into Eastern Europe. What is the most information-starved population on Earth today? It's refugees who are camp-based, living in refugee camps, and we're going to take advantage of the sad fact that the average stay in a refugee camp these days is between 17 and 20 years. We're going to be starting with both Greta Van Susteren and I, with a team of our colleagues, went to Bangladesh to visit the Rohingya camp, where we discovered that there is a surprisingly huge hunger for news and information, and not just for the physical needs that they have of food, safety, and water. They were interested in finding out news and information from Myanmar, what's going on in the country that they left. In Eastern Europe, East Asia, what's happening around Eastern Asia, where many of them have relatives and friends. And also, very important, what's happening in the United States and the United Nations. Have people forgotten them? So they're cut off, they know they're cut off, they don't want to be cut off. And the good news is that the entire NGO community has laid the groundwork for our kind of broadcasting, and the Rohingya are very surprisingly attentive listeners to programming on hand washing and vaccination and tying down your roof, but they understandably want much more. So we're going to start with learning English. Our question to the Rohingya adults, do you want to learn English? Not so much. The question, do you want your children to learn English? Every hand in the room went up. We're starting with our Learning English programming, and we're going to be working into developing our relationships with community stations, and then ultimately to our own broadcasts. We think this is a very exciting potential project that is very much in line with our own really extraordinary history. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Governors, any questions, comments for Amanda? So then we'll move on to the Office of Cuba Broadcasting. After the 2 years of excellent work by Malule Gonzalez, we're very fortunate to have attracted somebody of Tomas Regalado's background and experience to lead OCB. And it would not be an understatement to say that in his short 2 to 3 months, he has really, really energized the Martis in a way that they needed to be and haven't been in a long time. So Tomas, please tell your story. It's one that I'm very proud of.
Thank you very much, John. Governors, I'm happy to report that last night we launched 2 live programs, new programs in TV Marti. One night newscast and also one of those opinion shows. And this is important because TV Marti only had 4 hours of live programming during the day. So our goal is to have 75 hours in the next 60 days. As a matter of fact, John, as we spoke, we are doing that as we speak. This coming weekend, we're launching 5 new shows in TV Marti, and that is done within our budget and within hiring any more people. We have just shifted people. We are in the midst of more of the times where Cuba is in a situation where people need to know. This December, there will be a new constitution. Cuba will be the only country in this hemisphere with 2 presidents with equal power, 1 prime minister and 1 first secretary of the party. We know that this is creating rift between the factions, and we're drilling down, analyzing the importance of these changes and what it means for the people of Cuba. Also, December marks a day that could be horrible for about 600,000 people in Cuba. There are 600,000 people in Cuba that work on their own. They are part of what they call the free enterprise, the one that we see in the New York Times and all the media. Well, guess what? There are new strict regulations that, if implemented, and it seems that it will, these people won't be able to be what they want to be. So these people are disoriented, and they need information. The timing for OCB is, I think, John and Mr. Chairman and governors, the most important timing in the last 20 years. We don't know what is going to happen when these changes to the Constitution being implemented, but we do know that there is a situation in Cuba whereby there are factions fighting each other. The other thing is that we're drilling down on Nicaragua and Venezuela. There are thousands of Cuban doctors in Venezuela, thousands of Cuban soldiers and doctors in Nicaragua. They have relatives in Cuba. So we're focusing on Cuba and in Nicaragua and in Venezuela because it all has consequences to the national security of the United States. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to report, and John, that yes, we are going at 90 miles away. Our goal is to have a new and a more modern OCB platforms. We are following the BOA. We're launching next week in the digital a true or false section on Cuba, and we will have professionals dealing with that. So yes, we're moving forward. We are within budget. We're looking forward to the new fiscal year, and we're looking forward also to be not the alternative, but the only medium of news for the people of Cuba. Thank you.
Tomas, I think you have a tape to show too.
I do? Okay.
The Office of Cuba Broadcasting proudly announces that it is reinventing itself, adapting to the political changes in Cuba and creating new content for the 21st century to serve the people of Cuba. Under the new administration in the last 70 days, Radio Marti, the signature platform, has jumped from the 90s to the needs of 2018. Radio Marti has expanded its core services, delivering hard news from 2 hours daily to 6 hours daily. 17 new programs are on the air weekdays and weekends, from the healthcare to the voice of the LGBT community. Radio Marti has added technology segments, new automobiles, the real history of Cuba, and an information campaign called Cuba Know Your Rights. where segments of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations are read throughout the programming.
Radio Martí y Freedom House, la organización mundial que defiende la democracia y los derechos humanos, quieren que conozcas tus derechos.
On a joint project with Freedom House, we have created a human rights hotline.
Nuestra línea de los derechos humanos,
where people from Cuba can call and register their complaints that, once confirmed by professional journalists, are sent to Freedom House for dissemination.
Bienvenidos a este programa de análisis en profundidad.
Hola Cuba, les saluda Karen Caballero.
TV Martí has expanded its news programs from 30 minutes news shows to 1.5-hour shows, and plans to have weekend news shows as well as 30 new TV shows with a vast array of news relating to the entertainment sector, sport, technology, and news analysis. In the last 60 days, TV Martí reporters have been live in Nicaragua, up close and center among popular protests, broadcasting for OCB's TV, radio, and digital platforms. OCB was present in Bogotá, Colombia, for the swearing-in ceremony of President Iván Duque, and then in the city of Cúcuta, the border with Venezuela, with a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, who went to observe the human crisis of the refugees fleeing Venezuela into Colombia.
I mean, you have heard us be loud about Cuba. You have continued to hear us to be loud about Venezuela. We are now pushing to get a Security Council meeting on Nicaragua, and Bolivia is the next one we have to watch for. So these are a lot of the crises in the region, but the lesson in this is, had the region let us really go after Venezuela when we wanted to, maybe they wouldn't be suffering as much.
TV Martí was live in Guyana, where Cubans have to go to get their U.S. visas, and in Trinidad Tobago, where there are hundreds of Cubans protected by ACNUR. TV Martí plans to cover the upcoming United Nations General Assembly in late September with interviews of heads of state. Martí Digital is also reinventing itself with a more modern design, a plan to have dozens of short videos every single day, plus a new segment called Cuba True or False that mirrors the VOA True or False. Martí Digital, with our own program and content created in-house through research and investigative journalism, has in the last 8 months almost 5 million visits with an average stay time of 10 minutes in Facebook. We have 208,000 followers. Cuba is in the 6th place. In YouTube, in the last 8 months, we had close to 8 million views, 300,000 of those in Cuba. Twitter and Instagram have added several thousand followers in all platforms. The main users are among the ages of 25 to 34 years of age. The Office of Cuba Broadcasting is not under the radar any longer. In the last 60 days, we have hosted Senator Marco Rubio, first time visiting the facilities, Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, Ron DeSantis, and Ted Yoho. We have also hosted 16 postgraduate students from George Mason University School of Government and Policy on their way for a week-long visit to Cuba. In order to create support in different cities and states throughout the U.S., we have hosted several groups of Cuban-American leaders from Houston, Texas, and Tampa, Florida. We are also hosting local groups from the Cuban-American and Dominican community, as well as other members of this diverse community. OCB is reinventing itself and changing with times.
There you go. Thank you, Tomas. Governors, questions, comments? Okay, we'll go over to Tom Kent now. And I made a note just in introducing Tom. Just first of all, Tom, to once again thank you for your service. It's been really a great 2 years. You spend a lot of time in very, very repressive media environments, but what you're going to talk about today is how those repressive environments tend to like to rewrite history at times. So why don't you take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, John. The future will happen only one way, but the past keeps changing. Across the countries served by RFE-RL, there's a battle going on over the past. What truly happened, who gets to define it, and what it means for the present day. Along with covering today's news, RFE-RL also gives its audience an honest record of the past to keep dark moments from being repeated and to highlight past times of democracy and tolerance in hopes of inspiring the same values now. In the former Soviet Union, for instance, there's a trend toward nostalgia for communist times. Some young people today think the Soviet Union was all about parades and Sputnik and happy children. It was the idealized image painted by Soviet propagandists. It's also one that serves Russia's present leadership, since it inspires patriotism and faith in their rulers. Less remembered today are shortages of food and consumer products, ecological catastrophe, and pervasive secrecy. I'm going to play a clip from a report done by one of RFE/RL's Russian regional services highlighting a nuclear disaster in 1957 that's little spoken of today.
сентября 1957 году. Мне очень трудно говорить. Ну, произошел такой взрыв, толчок сильный. Это мы никто не знали. После этого мы где-то 3, может, неделю учились. Нас никто ничего не тревожил.
We don't deny the Soviet Union's successes, but we offer balance about the past that our audiences, especially young viewers, may not be aware of. Now from Russia in 1957 to Croatia in the Second World War. Here's a video from RFE/RL's Balkan service. The title says, Jasenovac, Taboo Memories.
U vrtlogu rata 1941. godine, kada su u Hrvatskoj uspostavljeni ustaški logori, jedna Austrijanka nesebično je rizikovala svoj život da bi spasila što više djece i njihovih majki.
This is a story about the Nazi death camp at Jasenovac in Croatia, known as the Balkan Auschwitz. To this day, Croatians debate what happened there. Some minimize or even deny the horrific events. RFE/RL has been painstakingly tracking down and interviewing former inmates of Jasenovac. Many of them especially revere Diana Budisavljevic, an Austrian doctor who helped get thousands of children released from the camp.
Mogu biti samo zahvalna i reći da je stvarno bila i čovjek i heroina i da za to treba veliko srce da pruži drugima neku mogućnost života, boljeg života i spašavanja u krajnjem slučaju od smrti. I svaka je čast. Čujte, možda sam malo emotivka, a onda čovjek koji nedostaju riječi. Malo iz vremena.
The video piece and a detailed accompanying website reveal atrocities that should be undeniable. They also celebrate the values of tolerance and courage in the face of evil. And now further back to 1917. For 23 months after the Bolshevik Revolution, Azerbaijan had its own democracy. Current leaders in Azerbaijan, like their Soviet predecessors, say little about this short-lived period. Their line's been that Western-style freedoms aren't right for Azerbaijan. Here's a video clip from our Azeri service about how, at that time, democracy did work. It looks back at the laws on press freedom at the time and how a blogger who was jailed under Azerbaijan's current government would have been free to write if he'd lived in that Azeri society.
Qeyri-kəslərin, yəni administrasiyanın ixtiyarı yoxdur ki, məhkəmədən kənar qəzetə yazanı cəzalandırsın.
Qanunverici hakimiyyətin və yaxud icra edici hakimiyyətin vasitəsinə çevrilmir. Yəni belə baxıram ki, mən o dövrdə də nə bilim 26-27 yaşında bir gənc olsaydım və fəaliyyətim olsaydı, çox güman ki, yəni nəticəsi eyni olmazdı. və bu heç bir həbsə gətirib çıxarmazdı.
Finally, we'll go all the way back to ancient times, to the celebrated Gandhara civilization in what today is northwest Pakistan. Extremists there today claim it's impossible for religions to live peacefully together. But an audio series by RFE/RL's Radio Mashal found a history of religious and ethnic tolerance right in that region, going back as far as that civilization in the first millennium.
न सिर्फ प्रोग्राम की बल्कि बुद्ध मत जो आगा द स्वा की द डेर प पीक बाने हो कना द नो प्रोग्राम की वस ची माता सुई ची कला द हिंदू शाही पीरियड आसार कारी वसरा द मुसलमान दौर द जुमात कारी नूर कारी द ब्यासरा द दार्दिक सिविलाइजेशन आगा ग्रेवयार्ड ची रागे वरसरा द पखवाउ शाकी पडीर जुनो की दी की बुतानु द देना मुंग दा पते लिखी ची दलता द मौजूदा दौर नम ज्यादा आबादी व पागा दौर की और दा डेर यो खुशहाल जेओ.
We've now published the radio series as a book for our Pashto-speaking audience. The message is that part of the strength of that revered civilization came from its tolerance. Understanding the past is essential to building a positive future. Whether it's 1957 or the first millennium, RFE/RL is leveraging the lessons of history to promote a better present day. Thank you, John.
Yep, good. Thank you, Tom. Governors? So moving on to RFA, Ken mentioned earlier Wan Chin and Yang So Tirin, both RFA journalists, were jailed in Cambodia and were recently released on bail. They were victims, along with many other journalists, because of a crackdown on the opposition party, NGOs, and all independent media by the authoritarian Prime Minister Hun Sen. This is how he holds power and keeps power. And so the situation has fluctuated from bad to worse throughout the summer, and I'll let Libby talk about the role RFA is playing in continuing to cover the story in the most difficult of circumstances.
Thank you, John. So today I'd like to focus on RFA in Cambodia. I know you're well aware of the systematic dismantling of free press in Cambodia, which included the shuttering of 19 radio stations that had carried VOA and RFA content, the closure of RFA's operations in Phnom Penh after 20 years. Since RFA's first domestic election coverage in 1998 and every single communal and national election since, through our relentless countrywide local coverage, it's fair to say RFA has changed the information landscape in Cambodia. This is a country where there is a strongman military dictator, and RFA created an environment where citizens were not only informed about the country they lived in, but encouraged to discuss ideas, issues, and make informed decisions about their own life. When RFA did live casting during the national elections last year, including exit polls, voter interviews, and continuously engaging audiences nationwide leading up to and during the 16-hour live show on Election Day, while Cambodia media played sumo wrestling entertainment, the citizens realized in a really meaningful way just how fixed their country's elections were. It harkened back to the 2013 national elections, which were followed by huge months-long demonstrations in front of the U.S. Embassy. This was so deeply humiliating to Hun Sen that leading up to this past election, he said he should have just shot all the protesters, men, women, and children. He clearly was not willing for this to happen again. And frankly, he no longer needs to keep up the pretense of democracy anymore. He has the CCP ATM pumping money, weapons, and authoritarian tools into Cambodia. He shut down free press, he ejected NDI, he closed down the opposition party, and put Kem Sokha, their leader, in jail. The obliteration of democracy in Cambodia culminated in the bogus re-election of Hun Sen on July 29th this year. What many people don't realize is that Hun Sen came to power as the prime minister following a bloody coup in 1997. RFA produced a documentary on the coup and the fact that no one has ever been held accountable for the hundreds of extrajudicial killings, even though we know exactly who's to blame. The video was broadcast on the 21st anniversary of the coup, which happened to be right before the election. So before we watch a 2-minute excerpt, I want to spend a moment to talk about the human toll of our work in that country. Hun Sen has targeted former RFA Cambodia staff, threatening, harassing families of all those that had been forced into hiding after the false arrest of their 2 colleagues. We are so relieved that the 2 were released after 9 months of horrific treatment in prison, but those charges are still hanging over them, and the threat of future imprisonment is real. The message is clear, and our former staff members are living under constant threat just because they dare to tell the truth on RFA. So despite access problems and the harassment of our former journalists, RFA will continue to shine the light on Hun Sen's abuses, and more importantly, the CCP's military and other influence in Cambodia, including so many secretive foreign investments. They now account for 30% of the annual investment in Cambodia, exceeding even that of the home government. So can we please play my brief 2-minute clip?
Ở con cram được rồi tia,แต่กรอบนึงមកអាផ្ទះខ្ញុំនឹងទៅវាទៅជះលើកូនខ្ញុំទៅខ្ញុំឈរនៅម្នាក់ឯងអត់អីយើងងាកទៅប្តីដួលងាកទៅកូនស្លាប់អស់
Picknell was one place where I ended up digging up the body of a man who we found only wearing shorts. He was handcuffed and he had a bullet in his head.
Sir, the use of force, do you regret the use of force? That's what they seem to be complaining about. Do you regret the use of force?
អត់មានស្ដាយអីទាំងអស់រឿងដែលគេប្រើមកណា
I'm afraid not. They use, not us.
មិនបានអ្នកឯងនៅតែនិយាយអាបញ្ហាហ្នឹង
Why you continue to say like that?
បញ្ហាគេរ៉ារិតណាប្រើកម្លាំងខ្ញុំប្រើកម្លាំងឯណា
Rather use the force. I don't use the force.
ខ្ញុំប្រើកម្លាំងតែមិនទប់ឥឡូវលោកឯងឲ្យខ្ញុំដកថយឬឲ្យខ្ញុំទប់
I use the force to prevent them.
ឥឡូវលោកឯងទៅលងវែងខ្លួនឯងទៅយកក្បាលទៅរងក្របខ្លួនឯង
You go to a long way yourself.
You can go to a long way for shooting by Pol Pot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Charmer. Thank you, Libby. So last, Middle East Broadcasting Networks has been in need of some updating for a while, and bringing Alberto in has been just the right recipe for that. He did it really the right way, thoughtfully putting together a plan, changing staff as needed, changing management as needed, and really getting the credibility of both Al-Hurra and Sawa to rise in the region in a way that we couldn't have anticipated to come along this quickly, frankly. So I want to give the floor over to Alberto to talk about his resurgence of MBN, and you have some upcoming, I think, show openings.
Thank you, CEO Lansing. The profound transformation of Middle East Broadcasting Networks pace is intensifying. This is a complex, stressful, and difficult process. While the transformation of MBN's digital platforms and Radio Sawa have their own speed and their own reforming and strengthening going on, much of our efforts over the past few months have focused on revitalizing Al-Hurra television and trying to make it relevant for the first time in many, many years. Those efforts and those plans are about to come to fruition. We are at the verge of having a new look, new studios, new programming emphasizing free thinking, reformist, and liberal trends in the region, a new and much expanded and much more aggressive news grid. The countdown is continuing as we expect to put all of this in place by the end of next month, by the end of October. And even before we've launched that, we're already seeing reaction by retrograde and hostile proxies in the region in places like Lebanon and Iraq. So I think the fact that our adversaries are anticipating what we're going to do is a good signal. And here's our report.
most of the Arab world today, expressing ourselves freely is a crime. That needs to change.
The core of my show, Islam Hur, is to introduce a different Islamic ideology.
You will see a different screen with different content.
Stories and the news from inside Syria.
Debates with the newsmakers from inside Washington. News on U.S. foreign policy.
In a region where conspiracy theories, anti-Americanism, and anti-Semitism are prevalent,
we try to tackle the issues with objectivity and depth.
Islam itself needs to be liberated and freed from obsolete interpretation.
My name is Jumana Haddad, and I am a free voice, the voice of Al Hurra. Me too. New voice on Al Hurra.
This is Islam Bahir. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alberto. That's our presentation. Chairman Weinstein.
Thank you, CEO Lansing. Look, I just want to note for the record that this is an absolutely historic moment for this agency, not simply through the rechristening that you've led us through as the U.S. Agency for Global Media, but also for every one of our media entities. I think all of us on the board sits here with immense pride, whether it's the upcoming Iran 24 channel, whether it's Current Time, whether it's the focus on history in Eastern Europe, whether it's the transformation of Cuba broadcasting and the live coverage, the incredible coverage and the painful coverage out of Cambodia, the work on the Uyghurs that RFA has done that has finally been picked up by the major media this summer. I mean, it was really just at RFA that there was coverage, and all of a sudden in the last few weeks it's been on the front of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the Washington Post, and not simply on the, I guess, in the editorials of the Washington Post, which has been very good on the issue, to the absolutely amazing work at MBN and the rebranding of Al Hurra, the focus on this free, liberal, free-thinking niche that's going to be ours in the Arab world. I just really want to praise you, Mr. CEO. I want to praise all the entity heads, and I really want to praise the entire staff. I think we have, there's an immense record of accomplishment here, and the momentum has just picked up extraordinarily, the collaboration. I think all of us on the board have a lot to be proud of, and just really want to praise you for your strategic leadership, for moving this forward, and for the hard work of everyone around the table, and especially the hard work of those in the field who put their lives at risk and their families' lives at risk every single day to get the truth out. There's a lot to be proud of here at the U.S. Agency for Global Media, and I think we've just seen the start of what is going to be an extraordinary period for this newly christened agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael.
I'd like to echo Ken's comments. Each meeting is built upon itself, each of our board meetings is built upon itself with such speed that it feels like each meeting feels like an inflection point, and then we go ahead 2 months later and it feels like we've advanced the ball years in just a matter of months. So the work is almost, I mean, not to sound too emotional, but it almost gives you chills to see the quality and the advancement and the modernization and the understanding of how to reach audiences today and the impact that we can have relative to where we were just 2 months ago, let alone 2-3 years ago. So I want to say thank you and to applaud all the work from the very top, John and Amanda, and down to everybody who is doing such an extraordinary job in running the services, and I'm sure your staff who are so much responsible for this. But it's truly, it's meeting to meeting, it gets even more exciting, and thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Any further comments, questions from the governors? Great, there Being none, let me note that the next board meeting will be held at MBN headquarters in Springfield on November 14th, 2018. So we'll have the opportunity to see up close and personal the new studios and the new programming. All of us are very exciting. I will work closely with my fellow governors and CEO Lansing to develop the agenda for this meeting. I encourage all governors to give me, CEO Lansing, or BBG staff, or maybe this U.S. AGM staff, input on topics you wish to see addressed at the next meeting. November 14th, again, let me repeat it, Springfield, Virginia at MBN. Do any governors wish to move to adjourn the meeting? Great. There's a move by Governor Kempner. Is there a second? Governor Aaron. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We hereby conclude this formal meeting of the Broadcasting Board of Governors of the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Thank you very much.
Okay.